Good morning. Now in this section we are going to talk about a very important topic of ethics. Ethics and Integrity, GS paper 4. And that topic is ethics and law. Now as we know, we will discuss that in later class, that ethics is that system which tells us about what is right and what is wrong. Ethics tells us what is good and what is bad. Ethics tells us what is desirable and what is undesirable. What should I do and what should I not do. So that is the whole idea of the ethics in general. So we will discuss that a lot in detail, that what exactly, how can we decide about right and wrong. There is one important thing about ethics. But ethics is not the only system in our life that tells us about right and wrong. Law is also another important system that tells us what is right and what is wrong. So a very important thing that we need to understand is that how is it that ethical right and wrong differs from the legal right and wrong. So there's a very important question that we as a normal people, general people also, but more particularly about this as a civil servant, you should understand what is ethically right and what is legally right. What is ethically wrong and what is legally wrong. So there is one important topic that we are going to talk about in this class here. Now if you look at ethics and law, it is a very important topic from UPSC point of view, because for last few years at least 3-4 questions have been asked directly from ethics and law. There was a question, for example, that write a short note on ethics and law. In answer to that question, you can write everything that we are going to discuss in this class here. So that is the first important. Let us see that what exactly the two are, how the two are different from each other. Now if we look at ethics and law, then we can talk about two basic differences between the two. First important difference is that ethics is always based on our individual reason. It's based on our individual reason. We reason out ourselves, and then on the basis of that we decide what is right and what is wrong, and then after we execute that right, and then after we simply do that. So ethics is based on our individual reason. Now this fact that ethics is based on our own understanding, our own reason and all, so ethical right and wrong may keep on changing on the basis of person. So ethically what is right for me, it may be wrong for you, because my reason is different and your reason is different. My way of looking at life is very different and your way of looking at the life would be very different. We all have our own way of looking at the life and thinking about it. So depending on how do you look at your life, how do you look at your situation, your circumstances, how do you look at your conditions, well, you may think something else is right and I may think something else is right. Not only that, since it is based on our region and region keeps on evolving. So what is right for us today, for me, take the example of me again, one individual. What is right for me today, tomorrow it may be wrong. Of course, because our region also changes. How did I reason? So what was right for me in my 20s, for example, when I was a student like you people, well, was very different than what is right for me today in my 40s when I'm a teacher. So at that point of time, what was right, it may be wrong today. And what was wrong at that point of time may have become right today. So because, well, my way of looking at life has changed significantly for the last 20 years or so. I have got much better, different type, not better I would say, but a different type of understanding of what life is. So on the basis of that, my reasoning has changed, my viewpoint about life has changed. On the basis of that, my right and wrong has also changed. So ethics is based on individual reason. Because of that, well, it is dependent on individual again, as we'll see shortly further. And it may keep on changing for the same individual also, on the basis of the situation, on the basis of time, on the basis of our understanding of the things and all. So that is the first important thing. Law, on the other hand, is not based on your reason. Law is based on certain legislation. Law is based on certain legislation passed by a particular legislature. It does not depend on you, that whether you personally believe in that or not, whether you reason it out or not, you understand that reasoning or not. So that is not important in ethics. In law, it is based on the legislation. So for example, there is a law in our country, while you're driving on the road, for example, then right thing is to drive on the left side of the road. So if you drive on the left side of the road, then you are right, and if you drive on the right side of the road, then you are wrong. There is nothing ethical into that. It is just a law that tells us. And if you change the law, right and wrong can also change. So if you go to America, for example, they have different law. So in America, driving on the right is right and driving on the left is wrong. In India, driving on the left is right and driving on the right is wrong. There's nothing special about driving left or right. It's just the law that we follow. So American legislation has passed a different law and we in India have a different law. Because of that, in India, for example, whenever that jurisdiction of the law is there, well, everybody has to follow that. So it is based on our individual region and it is based on the legislation passed by a particular legislative body like the parliament, like the Congress, like the Senate, like the Duet, Assembly, whatever you can say. Now this difference between ethics and law, that it is based on individual region and it is based on the legislation, leads to many other differences also. One difference is that law is a formal system of norm. Formal system of norm. Why so? Because every law has a certain formal process that in order for an action to become a law, it must be proposed in a legislative body like the parliament, where it must be debated, discussed, and then after it must be passed by a certain type of majority, sometimes simple majority, sometimes a special majority, 2/3 majority, 3/4 majority, whatever. So a certain formal process is followed for any action to become law, number one. Not only that, after making the law, you also have to ensure that it must be publicized in a certain manner. In a Gazette of India, for example, it must be told to the people that this law has been passed. So there is a formal process of making the law. There is a formal process of, you can say, keeping the law again, categorizing that or recording that or storing that and disseminating that to the people, telling people about the law. So that is one important. There is every aspect of the law, there is a formality. There is a formal process into that. Ethics, on the other hand, since it is based on our own region, so it is a non-formal. So there is no formal formal process to tell us that in order to make the ethical decision about my life, I have to follow these procedures again. No, there is nothing called that. So I can simply do whatever I want. You can do simply whatever you want again. That is what ethics may be, possibly. One thing is that. Second important thing is that law, since it is based on the legislation, so it is an objective system. It is an objective system. Ethics, on the other hand, as you can appreciate from the previous discussion, it is a subjective system of norm. It is a subjective system of norm. What is the meaning of that? That in ethics, as we have seen here, that well, each individual has his own right and wrong. So what is my right may be your wrong. What is your right may be my wrong. So again, as you have seen, is our region. So we reason out differently again. We are different people. We have different way of looking at the life or understanding the life. So our rights and wrong may be different. It depends on the subject. Law, on the other hand, it is objective. It does not depend on what I personally believe in. So for example, even if I believe that driving on the left is not right, it is wrong, then also if I am in India, I must follow that. So that does not depend on whether I personally believe that or not. It is applicable on everyone equally. So equality before law, as we often call. So whether you personally believe in that or not, whether you personally agree with that or not, you have to follow that. It is applied on everybody who falls within the purview of that law, within the jurisdiction of that law. There is another important thing. Further, we often say that law is often more, you can say, specific and concrete, in the sense that it often talks about exact behavior. So law simply talks about some exact behavior. Drive on the left side of the road, that is it. Pay your tax, that is it. So it is exact, specific, concrete behavior that is prescribed by the law. Ethics, on the other hand, is more general, more abstract. And in ethics, normally, we try to find out certain values and certain principles. We try to find out certain values or certain principles which can help us to arrive at an exact decision. Ethics is about that. We'll discuss in our class later that what is the meaning of the term principle. How can we identify the principles of morality in general? Law is not necessarily about that. Law is simply do this, don't do that. That is it. But ethics goes to much deeper into that process of thing. Try to understand what are those principles, what are those moral values that can guide us to decide about the right behavior in a particular situation. So these are the important differences that we can think of between ethics and law in that case, based on this fact that ethics is based on individual reason and law is based on a formal legislation passed by a legislative body like the parliament and all. So there is one difference between the two and their implication. The second difference between ethics and law is that ethics, again we are talking about, this is ethics and this is law. Ethics is enforced by our own conscience, while law is enforced by the fear of the state. Fear of the state. That is a very important thing. Ethics is enforced by our own conscience. Ethics is all about certain thing inside us that we call the conscience. What is the meaning of the term conscience? We will discuss in our class in much detail what is exactly the meaning of the conscience. Again, conscience is the central idea in the ethics in general. Every right and wrong comes out of our conscience. What is that conscience? Let's briefly talk about that. Now, we often say that conscience is an abstract structure in our mind, something abstract in our mind that performs three important functions for us. So let us try. Conscience is a very complicated matter in philosophy. I'm not going to go into the philosophical detail of conscience here. But we can see here that conscience, we can understand that in terms of its functions for us, what actually it does for us. So we see here that conscience performs three important functions for us. Three functions of conscience. What are they? Well, conscience always tells us normally that what is right and what is wrong. Human mind also, we'll talk a lot about that in our class later, that human mind is such that whenever we do something or whenever we see somebody else doing something, then our mind always divides our own action or somebody else's action into the strict categories of right and wrong. We always think about what is right. So if we can say do something, then we think about that sometimes later or at that point of time, is it right or is it wrong? This is a very important characteristics of the human mind. This is something that makes us human beings special. It is because of this thing that we say that human beings are ethical animal. Other animals are not ethical. Human beings are ethical animal. When we say human beings are ethical animal, then we don't mean, or ethical species. We don't mean that we always do the right thing. Well, we all do the wrong sometimes or the other in our life. That life is just like that. When we say human beings are ethical, then we essentially mean that we always think in terms of right and wrong. So if you do something wrong today, and if you come to think about it, that my action was wrong, then, well, you still become ethical in that case. You have done something wrong, but still there is some ethics in you, that your mind actually tells you that you have done something wrong. So other animals do not have this capacity, this ability again. A dog, for example, after barking at a person, it does not think about it, did I do the right thing or not? No, it does not. It simply barks and moves ahead. We, on the other hand, when we shout at a person in extreme anger, then later on we think, did I do the right thing? And if we decided we did the wrong, then we feel sorry about that. We go to that person, we apologize to that person also. I'm so sorry that I was angry and I shouted at you the way I should not have. Or sometimes we decide that yes, my shouting was justified, it was right, that this person deserved my shouting. In either case, you become ethical. So our mind is such that we always think in terms of right and wrong. From where that idea comes up, this is where the conscience comes into place. We can say that our conscience is a repository of all the ideas of right and wrong. It is storehouse of right and wrong. It is the abstract structure, the culmination of, the accumulation of all the right and wrong that we have in our life. Whenever you do something, it tells you, well, this is right or this is wrong. That is the first important thing. It divides our action into the strict categories of right or wrong. This is one thing that conscience does for us. Then, conscience does second thing also for us. What is that? The second thing that conscience does for us is that whenever we do something right, then it gives us reward for that. It rewards us for that. How does it reward? It rewards us by giving us the positive emotions to us. Positive emotions like you can say feelings of say pride or enthusiasm or confidence or positive energy, optimism, etc., etc. So when we do something right, you must have seen, for example, when we do something right, then we feel proud of ourselves. Yes, I did the right thing. We feel enthusiastic about our own decision. We are full of confidence about that decision. And we are full of positive energy also, because once you take a right decision, then after you have to implement that decision. And in order to implement that decision, you need energy. That energy is supplied by your conscience. We'll discuss in some later class that how it can actually, what is the form of that energy, from where that energy comes to us. But more importantly, optimism. Optimism also we will discuss in our class. What is the meaning of the term optimism? We'll discuss that in some later class. But optimism, we can see, is simply the thing that whenever you do the right thing, sometimes doing the right thing may put us in trouble also. Doing the right thing is not easy all the time. So it may be difficult for us. Now, if you are, we can say, in a difficulty by doing the right thing, and if you feel that I can still overcome that difficulty, then you are being optimistic. So in spite of having the problem, you feel that we can actually overcome this problem. That feeling is something that is called optimism. We'll discuss a lot of that in our class. There's a whole class that I'll devote to the optimism there. So the second thing that conscience does for us is to reward us for doing the right thing by giving these emotions in us. That is the second thing. And third thing that conscience does to us is that whenever we do something wrong, then it gives us punishment for that. It gives us punishment for that as well. How does it give the punishment to us? Well, it gives punishment again to us by giving negative emotions to us, negative feelings to us. What are those feelings? Feelings like shame, guilt, doubt, remorse, confusion, lack of confidence, or most importantly, I would say a nagging second thought, etc., etc. So when we do something wrong, you must have seen that you feel ashamed of ourselves that I did something wrong, or you feel guilty in our mind that I did something wrong, or we are doubtful, we are confused about our own decision. We are remorseful of that. We regret that decision sometimes later, or that confidence is missing again. We do something, but still that confidence is missing. That did I do? But most importantly, I will say that nagging second thoughts. That after doing something, we keep on thinking, did I do the right thing? Did I do the right thing? Or I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have done that. So think of it. It's very important, interesting thing to understand that after doing something, if you keep on thinking again and again, did I do the right thing? Did I do the right thing? Or I shouldn't have done that, or I shouldn't have done that, then it means that your conscience is punishing you for doing what it thinks is wrong. So that is how you can say conscience prohibits us from doing the wrong. That is what conscience is. This is how we can conceptualize the whole idea of the conscience here. So finally, we can say here that conscience is something in our mind which tells us, first of all, which tells us what is right and wrong, which reward us, secondly, for doing what it writes in the form of these emotions, and thirdly, it punishes us for doing what it thinks is wrong in the form of these emotions. So in ethics, we do the right thing because we want to have these emotions, and we refrain from doing the wrong thing because we don't like to have. So what is that enforcement mechanism? Once you decide what is right, why do you do the right thing? Or why do we keep away from the wrong again? It is because of this. So enforcement mechanism is inside us. There is something inside us that not only tells us what is right and wrong, it creates motivation for also in us to do the right thing and not to do the wrong thing. That is what conscience is, and that is what is the central idea of ethics in that sense. So ethics is enforced by that conscience. Law, on the other hand, in the case of law, there is nothing called conscience in that case. It is just that we are afraid of the state. That if you don't do the right thing, then the police will punish you, you will be fined, you will be put in jail. So in order not to get the fine, or not to pay the fine, or not to be in jail, we simply follow the law, whether you internally believe that or not. So technically speaking, this can be one important difference between the two. It is the state is very important in law, and in the case of ethics, well, our mind is more important. It is something that keeps on telling, do this, don't do that. So there is some internal enforcement mechanism that all of us have inside us, and that enforcement mechanism is what we call the conscience. So that is the second important difference between ethics and law. It is enforced by our conscience, and it is enforced by our own, it's the fear of the state. punishment of the state, punishment by the state or reward by the state in some other case. That is how the two are different from each other. Now, if you look at the relationship between ethics and law, then that relationship is also very important for us to understand. How are the two related to each other? Let's talk about that a little briefly. Suppose, for example, suppose let us make a circle. Suppose this circle is the circle of ethics. Everything that is right for you may be put in that circle. Everything that is right for me may be put in my circle. We all have our own circle of ethics that tells us this is right. Outside that circle, everything else is wrong. So let us put all the right and wrong inside us, well, into this circle. If you make a similar circle of law, then you will find that circle of law may be something like this. So you will find that between law and ethics, there is a significant amount of overlap is there. There is significant amount of overlap is there between the two. Most often, as you will see shortly, that law does not tell you to do something that is against ethics. There is a significant amount of overlap. Of course, we are living in an ethical society. So the parliament normally does not make an unethical law. It makes law on the basis of by keeping into the ethical system that we have, ethical understanding that we have in our society at that particular point of time. So most of the times there is a consistency between the law and ethics. Both of them tell us the same thing. Law does not tell you to do unethical thing most of the time. Law does not tell you to kill people. Law does not tell you to lie to people. Law does not tell you to, you can say, cheat people. So these are the unethical things. These are the illegal things as well. So most often law and ethics are same. Both of them tell us to do the right thing. But in every society, you will find every society there are some actions which are ethically right but legally wrong. There is some amount of non-overlapping part is there always, every possible society. So some amount of non-overlapping part is always there. So these are the actions which are ethically justified but legally not. They are ethical but illegal. On the other hand, every society has certain actions which may be legally justified but ethically it may be wrong for some people. So these are the two important actions. Non-overlapping parts are there. Legally right but ethically wrong. Ethically right but legally wrong. They are the actions which create the biggest ethical dilemma in our life in general. So in our public life. So when we are in public life again, and if there is a conflict between ethics and law, our ethics, our morality and law, then how can we handle that? How can we resolve that again? If you do the right thing according to your ethics, police will punish you. And if you try to follow the state command law, then your conscience will feel guilty in your mind. You feel ashamed of yourself that I should not have done that. That feeling will be there in you. So these are the something which creates the biggest ethical dilemma in our life in general. And this ethical dilemma that I am talking about here is much bigger, much stronger, much powerful, much, you can say, difficult for the life of the civil servant. So this dilemma that I am going to talk about here, it will be much bigger for you people once you become a civil servant. Why so? Because as a private citizen, my job is to simply follow the law. So if I feel that law is unethical, then I can decide to violate the law and pay the fine. Everything is over. My conscience will not punish me in that case. If I have enough money in my pocket, I can break the law and can pay the fine for that. But you as a civil servant cannot do that, because your job is not simply to follow the law, but your job is to ensure that others also follow the law. So if you think that law is unethical, then after it will create such a big dilemma in you that not only you are doing wrong yourself, you are forcing other people also to do the wrong. This becomes a big ethical dilemma sometimes in the life of a civil servant. What to do in that case again? Well, the whole ethics paper is just about that. How to solve this dilemma. That we'll talk a lot in detail in our class later. But this is a big dilemma that civil servants often face. That where ethics and law are in conflict with each other, what to do that. Many such examples you can think of. So think of the case, for example, for most of us, many of us, again, you can say take the case of homosexuality, for example. Section 377, that was annulled by the Supreme Court a few years. A lot of controversy was there. So homosexuality, well, it was ethically justified. Most of the people believe that homosexuality is a part of, you can say, private life of the people. Why should the state go into that? But it was illegal. Or you can say the abortion in many cases. Abortion in many cases. We'll discuss about those cases in our class later. That what are the ethical issues involved in homosexuality or abortion, etc. For some people, abortion may be ethically justified, but legally it may be wrong. You know that in India we have very strict law of abortion again. Or on the other hand, something that may be legally right but ethically wrong. Let's say 300 years ago in India, perhaps 200, 300 years ago in India, sati might be an example of that. So there was no law against sati. Sati was justified. Sati was legally right. Nobody can file a case against you if you can say sati is practiced by. But it was of course unethical for many of the people. Or slavery in America. Before you can say civil war again, 200 years ago. So 200 years ago in America, slavery was legal. Almost all the great philosophers in America, all the founding fathers of America, they were all the slave owners. Slavery was legal, but it was of course unethical. That would be an example of that also. If you take more practical day-to-day example, then a very good example of legally justified but ethically not is the case of lying. Lying, you know that lying is unethical, of course. We should not lie. We'll talk about in our class again why lying is wrong. What are the ethical issues involved in the question of lying? We'll talk about that in our later class. But lying is legally justified. So, no, we don't have a law against lying. If you lie to somebody, lying is a crime in only one case. Can you think of? Well, lying is a crime in only one case, and that case is lying under oath. So, if you lie under oath, then that is a crime. That is a perjury. You can be charged under law. You can be put in jail for that, fine for that. But otherwise, not under oath, lying is not a crime. So if you lie to somebody else, then you may have faced some personal life problem that people will not trust you, but nobody can file a case against you that he lied to me, so put him in jail. No, that cannot be done. We don't have a law against lying. So lying is legally justified. We all have a right to lie. Well, it may have personal problem, but not a legal problem. But except under oath. But ethically, it is definitely wrong. So many such examples are there where you can say ethically justified, legally justified but ethically not, legally right but ethically wrong, and ethically justified but legally not, ethically right but legally not. So that is how we can see these three types of actions are there. These two are the problem of dilemma that often put us in our public life in general. Now, next important question is that if there is a big conflict between ethics and law, then what is more important? Which should have supremacy over the other? Now, this is a very important and tricky question that we have to handle. Now, we normally say here that if the conflict between ethics and law is a small conflict, simpler conflict, then law of course is more important. We should take care of law as much as we can. But if the conflict between ethics and law is much bigger, then ethics is always more important than law. Ethical system, ethical understanding of right and wrong is higher value than the legal understanding. Ethics must have supremacy over the law. Why so? This is a very important thing that we need to understand here. Very important thing that we need to understand here. What is that? We often say that in such cases, ethics is more important than law because ethics is the basis on which the laws are number one formed or made. Ethics is the basis on which laws are formed, laws are made. Now that's a very important. How do we make a law? How do we decide that which law should be made and which law should not be made? Well, almost always there is some ethical basis of the law making. We will discuss in our class that what are the ethical basis on which laws are made in our country, or in any country for that matter. We'll talk about the ethical basis of law, but every law has some ethical foundation. That is the first important thing. More importantly, ethics is the basis on which laws are reformed also or changed also. Laws are reformed also or laws are changed also. So when the controversy between ethics and law becomes big enough, then we change the law in order to incorporate the ethics. So that is the second important thing that is here. Third important thing is that ethics is also the basis on which laws are repealed as well or annulled. Laws are annulled as well. So for example, if you look at here, then when the controversy about sati became large enough, then sati was thrown out of the law. It was unethical earlier, it became illegal also. When the controversy about slavery became large enough in America, then slavery was thrown out of the law also. It was unethical earlier also, it became illegal later on. Similarly, you can see when the homosexuality law, that section 377, well, it became controversial again. Then after, we changed the law in order to incorporate homosexuality as a part of the legal system as well. That yes, it is no longer a crime. It was crime earlier, it is no longer a crime, homosexuality in India. So when the controversy between ethics and law becomes large enough, then we either change the law or repeal the law altogether. But the most importantly, I would say here that ethics is the basis on which laws are interpreted as well. Because as I told you earlier, in law we often try to make it as clear as possible, concrete, specific as possible. But in spite of that, sometimes, well, some can say vagueness, some ambiguity may be there in the law, and because of that ambiguity we need interpretation of that law. How do we interpret that law? Well, ethics comes into play in that case. So ethics is that basis on which laws are interpreted also. What is the meaning of the law in that case? A very good example of this interpretation of law on the basis of ethics in our country is the Article 21 of our Constitution. All of you know that Article 21 gives all of us Indians the right to life and liberty. Liberty, for example. Now, do you think that the meaning of liberty today is same as it was in 1950s when this law was implemented, Constitution was implemented? Of course not. Liberty has changed significantly. I hope that you all are aware that many path-breaking judgment has been given by Supreme Court for the last 70 years in which the liberty has been interpreted. Article 21 has been interpreted again and again. Menka Gandhi case was one of them. More recently, you can say right to privacy. So it's so interesting to see that right to privacy was not considered as a fundamental right in 1950s, but now it is a fundamental right. How did it change? It changed not because the law is same, liberty is the same, but interpretation of the meaning of the term liberty has changed significantly. So Article 21 has been interpreted a number of times for the last 70 years, in which you can see that many different forms of things have been: right to education, right to food, even that section 370 homosexuality or adultery law. All of these things have been interpreted, well, by our ethics again, and the scope of Article 21 has become wider and wider with time. Word is same, article is same, but its meaning has changed significantly for the last 60-70 years or so. How did that happen? That happened because of the ethics. So as ethical system changes, as ethical understanding of the people in the society change, then slowly we see that, well, interpretation of the same law becomes something altogether different. Without changing the law also, we can change the meaning of the law, interpretation of the law. That is what, again, ethics and law are there. So ethics is the basis on which laws are first of all formed, changed, repealed, and most importantly interpreted. Because of that, we often say that if there is a controversy between ethics and law, then in that controversy ethics is always more, particularly when the controversy is big, large enough, then ethics is always more important than the law. Ethics must have supremacy over the law. That is one important thing that we need to keep in mind. In fact, we often say, it is another very important thing that we need to understand. We often say that ethics is a background, and out of that background law actually emerges. Suppose, for example, there is in our society on certain issues some amount of, say, ethical consensus. On some issues, suppose some amount of ethical consensus exists. Out of that ethical consensus, we often say that the law comes. So law must emerge. Law comes normally, but law must always emerge from the ethical consensus existing in the society. That is the meaning of the term good law. So we often define, if you have to define law, how can you define the law? We can simply say that law is the crystallized form of the ethical consensus existing in the society. So such law will be a good law. What is the meaning of the term ethical consensus? In ethics, as we have seen earlier, that there are a lot of controversies are there. What is right for me, it may be wrong for you. And what is wrong for me, it may be right for you, or vice versa. Ethics is highly controversial. Now suppose for example on one issue, suppose we are 100 people in this classroom. Suppose for example on some issue we have some controversy. Now we start to talking to each other. Then after I may convince you on some issue, you may convince me on some issue. And at the end of it, we arrive at a consensus. That is, all agree with that. And when we arrive at that consensus, then through that law normally comes. Law must be the representation of, crystallization of, concretization of the ethical consensus existing in the society. That makes it such a good law. Not only that, such laws are more successful. But when the law is not based on that ethical consensus, then law may be made, but that law will not be successful. If you look at some examples, Sati Law for example. Sati Law was the example of the first case. Now, when Sati was banned in India, then it was actually preceded by a huge movement run by the people like Raja Ram Mohan Roy and others who opposed Sati. So, by opposing Sati in the society, they tried to create certain consensus. And then after, on the basis of that, law was made, and that law became quite successful law. That was successful in eliminating Sati as a practice in our country. So, that was a good law in that case. But some law may be made without ethical consensus. They may be complete failure. A very good example of such a law which did not succeed that much according to me was the Dory Law. Dory is illegal in India. More than 50 years the Dory Law has been existing. Exactly 50 years I would say. 60 years now. 1961 Dory was outlawed in India. Dory is a crime. But do you think that this law is successful? Even after 60 years of this law in existence, you see, I believe that at least 70-80% of the marriages in India, some form of Dory is exchanged. People who demand Dory, they know that it is illegal, but still they demand. People who give the Dory, they also know that it is illegal, but still they offer the Dory. They give the Dory. So why is that Dory law has not been so successful? There may be other reasons also. I am not going to talk about that. But one reason is that the Dory law was not actually preceded by a ethical consensus. We did not have a movement against Dory perhaps. That did not create a public opinion in the mind of the people that Dory is wrong. So without creating that consensus about the wrong or right, if you make the law, then the law may exist on the book, but it will not be a successful law. It may not work that well in the society in general. That's why we often say that whenever we make a law, we must always create an ethical grounding for that, ethical basis of that, ethical root for that. Otherwise, this law will be this will be a formal law written in a law book, but it will never be a successful law in that case. So, we often say that ethics leads to law. That is the one important thing. But reverse may also be true, that once you make a law, then this law also helps us to widen that ethical consensus. It makes that ethical consensus bigger than that also. Suppose for example, when Sati Law was made, then it did not mean that every Indian started feeling that Sati is wrong. No, there are many people, they were outside of that consensus. They did not agree with the people who thought that Sati is wrong. But then after what happened, when law was made and it was strictly implemented, then even those people who were outside that consensus, they did not share that conviction that Sati is wrong. Slowly, they became part of that consensus. They started thinking, okay, it's a wrong thing again. So, we believe here that between ethics and law, there is a reciprocal relationship. Ethics influences the law, and law also influences the ethical system that exists in the society. Ethical consensus makes a good law, and a good law widens that ethical consensus. It makes more and more people to become part of that consensus. That is how the two are related to each other. So, there is a relationship between the two. There is some question on that also, that what is the relationship between the two, or how the two are related to each other, ethics and law in that case. So, that is how the two are related to each other, and this is how we can understand that. In case of civil service, you know that this conflict between ethics and law, as I told you, is a very important thing again. That what is it that we should follow? That for some civil servants, this conflict between ethics and law is so big that they find it difficult to do their job sometimes, because this conflict is so powerful, so big again. You must have heard the case of can say some IAS officer who have resigned from this office there because they were not able to follow accept the law in the society at that time. So, it is a big dilemma that is created by ethics and law, but this is a very important thing that we have to understand, how the two are related to each other and how the two, we can make a compromise between the two. So, that is how ethics and law are related to each other, and this is what they are.